Hey guys, today we're going to continue our talk about the Cold War, and we're going to talk about the first major conflict during the Cold War, and that is the Korean War. It's 1950 to 1953. Only 4 slides, but they're packed with a lot of big information here. In addition, after you watch or do this, your notes here, I'd like you to watch a 5-minute video that does a really good job talking about why the Korean War is important. So how do we get here? Remember the Empire of Japan from your interactive maps, when you shaded all that area, they had taken over Korea. But when Japan lost World War II, the Allies gained control of the Korean Peninsula. And so they had to decide what are they going to do with this country. And so like they did with a lot of other places, they're going to divide the country into North and South Korea. Dividing it up, why? So that way one part is communist and one part is democracy, or in this instance, democracy friendly. And what we're going to see is Norths are always going to be communist, whether it's Korea or when we get to Vietnam, and Souths are always going to be like democracy friendly, not true democracies, but democracy friendly. Okay, so the North is going to be communist, the South is non-communist. And where they're going to divide it is along this famous line of latitude, the 38th parallel, right here. Okay, so by 1949, the United States and the Soviet Union have withdrawn most of our troops from Korea. However, the Soviets continue to supply North Korea with military supplies. And with their backing, along with the backing of Mao Zedong in China, North Korea is going to invade South Korea in June of 1950. The goal is to unite all of Korea as a communist government. It will be that event, the invasion of North Korea into South Korea, that will begin what becomes known as the Korean War. All right? Now, in response, South Korea asked the United Nations to intervene. This is the first time that we are going to see the United Nations get involved in a conflict. And that happens because the Soviet Union abstains from the vote. They were upset that nationalist China was in the UN and not communist China. So they were like having a hissy fit. And without them to be there to veto, the United Nations approves uh, action by the United Nations into Korea. And so what we're going to see here is the United States will kind of lead this UN forces here. And the reason we're getting involved again is that policy of containment. Remember, the policy of containment is to try to stop the spread of communism. The leader of UN forces is going to be Douglas MacArthur. Okay, here's the guy with the big corncob pipe. Remember him from the Philippines? He valued people in the Philippines. I will return, and then he does return and famously wades through the ocean. And he's the guy that did the occupation of Japan after World War II. Well, he's going to lead the UN forces here in the early parts of the Korean War. And so by the time we get there, North Korea had pushed all the way down to the far corner of Korea around Busan. Okay, it is then when MacArthur lands here in Incheon and does a pincher movement, kind of, cut them off and surround them, and forces their troops all the way back up against the Chinese border here. It is when we push against the Chinese border here that China, being a communist nation, does not like the idea that the United States is up on its border, and the fact that we got like our naval ships going around its harbors. They take this as a declaration of war, and China's going to send some 300,000 troops into North Korea, way more than what we had there, and they just overwhelm us. So we push them from here back up across there, but then they're going to push us right back. So it goes back and forth. It is when China gets involved that Douglas MacArthur asks for something very drastic. He says, we face an entirely new war. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to freaking nuke China. He wanted to throw nuclear weapons at him. All right? President Truman was like, whoa, dude, chill out. We're trying to prevent World War III, not start World War III. And so when he says that, MacArthur gets angry, right? He's this tough general. Nobody tells me what to do, blah, 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 right? And so he sends letters to people in Congress talking crap on Truman, basically calling him big sissy, and going to the press, basically trying to go around the president to get them to agree to it without the president's consent. Truman just can't have this. You can't have somebody trying to undermine you. And so when he sends this letter to Congress criticizing Truman, Truman has no choice but to fire Douglas MacArthur. This is huge. He's one of the few five-star generals in our country's history, but he gets canned by President Truman. All right, over the next few years, Matthew Ridgway is going to lead the UN forces, and we'll go back and forth until both sides agree to a ceasefire, meaning that they will stop fighting. Did they officially sign a treaty? No. There's never been a treaty. The Korean War technically is still going on. So what ends up happening as a result of the ceasefire? They create a demilitarized zone along the 38th parallel, meaning there's no military that's allowed along the border. So what happened? The border goes back to what it was, but now that area is a demilitarized zone. And it still is today. And it's been kind of in the last year or so that it's been coming up in the news again about North Korea talking about wanting to unite together and things of this nature. All right, it's a very high temperament that or temper that goes on this area here that something could really spark a war here if the UN still didn't patrol that area today. All right, sorry, kind of stuttered there towards the end a little bit, but you guys got the gist. Again, watch that video to answer your 10th question. If you have any questions, shoot me an email.